Hello, welcome back. What we're going to do today is we are going to talk about the graphs of functions, right? So what we want to be able to do today is be able to interpret a graph of a given real-world scenario, right? So when we're analyzing graphs, right, we got to think about what are we actually doing, right? So think about just what the word analyze means, right? Analyze means that you're trying to say, like, what is happening. You're like looking at something and drawing conclusions from that, right? Analyzing is something you do a lot in English class. You probably do every now and then in social studies. You do it a lot in science, and we're going to do it in math too, right? So when we're talking about analyzing graphs, we can just say that we are interpreting what a graph is saying. All right, so we're just like saying, all right, here's a graph, here's the situation. Let's try and figure out what is actually happening based on what it looks like. All right, so we're just going to jump right in, right? We've got this graph over here. This graph represents the distance that Fran has ridden on her bike. We want to describe what's happening in the graph, right? So what I like to do when I'm going ahead and working through these examples, right, is I like to break the graph down into chunks, right? If you look at it, that line has three distinct pieces to it, right? So one of them is this chunk right here where it's going up. We've got this chunk over here where it's kind of just flat like that. And then we've got this other piece here where it's going up again, right? So I would, if you want to do it this way, it's not a bad habit to get into, right? We're just breaking it down in individual chunks and trying to think about what's going on, right? So another thing to take a look at when you're interpreting a graph is taking a look at what the axes are, right? So we've got time on our x-axis down at the bottom, and then we've got distance over on our y-axis going up and down. Right, so what's going to happen is as we go further to the right, time is going to be passing, right? Time is moving forward. As we go up on our distance, right, up on the y-axis, right, that means that we are going to have been moving further. Right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this example together. So first things first, we've got that red piece, right? It's, not a whole lot of time is passing, but we are going up quite a bit. So for that red chunk, we would say that Fran is biking pretty fast, right? Something in that vein, right? She's biking for a short period of time, but she's covering a lot of distance, right? It's just we're not traveling too far to the right, but we are going up quite a bit, right? Then we get to that blue piece where it kind of flattens out, right? So this is a common thing in a lot of these types of graphs, right, where it's sort of flat. So if I was flat, right, time is still passing, right? We're still moving further to the right, but I'm not going anywhere, right? The distance is staying the same, right? So if the distance is staying the same, then that must mean that she probably took a break. So Fran took a break. Something I also mentioned that I forgot to just a minute ago is that if you don't have like infinitely many colors at your disposal like I do on here, right? What I might suggest is, put a little 1 down there, a little 2 near that part, and then a 3 over by the third piece, right? Just so you can help organize your work and know which one you're talking about, right? And then over here I would say, oh yeah, this is 1, this is 2, and then this last part that we're about to just talk about right now is number 3. Right, so that is an option for you. When we're getting to that orange piece, right, that last part, we're now traveling forward again, right? The distance is going up and time is still passing, right? So we would say that Fran continues forward, right? If we take a real close look at it, right, and I'm gonna get all of this color coding out of the way for just a second. If we take a real close look, we notice that first piece that we had in red is a little steeper than the piece that we had in orange at the end of this, right? So what that's telling us is that at the beginning, she's going real fast, right? She's going faster than she is later on, because later on, she's not covering as much distance as quickly, right? So, that's a little bit more inside baseball on everything, right? But that is what's happening here. All right, let's try another one out. We've got another graph that represents the distance that Jerry has driven on his way to school. We want to describe what happens in this graph. All right, so what I'd like you to do is pause here, take a second and see if you can identify how many different little chunks we have there. All right, so give it a shot. Unpause when you think you got it. So hopefully you gave that a go, right? What I'm seeing, and I'm going to kind of zoom in on it just so I can show you what I'm looking at, is that we've got this chunk here, right, where we're going up real fast. Right? After that, we've got this short little piece that's flat. Then we go up a little bit more, and then we're flat again, right? And then after that, we're going up again, right? So there's actually 5 different pieces to this graph, right? Not confusing at all. So, let's talk about each one of those. So let me still be a little zoomed in, and we'll kind of shorten our description so it'll all fit. So for that red piece right at the start, right, piece number 1, right, we are covering a lot of distance in not a lot of time, right? So Jerry is speeding, right? Don't do that. When you start driving, don't speed. It's bad, right? Especially not as fast as Jerry seems to be going. So Jerry is speeding out of his driveway, right? Because we're covering a lot of distance in not a lot of time, right? The blue piece that comes next, right? Jerry must have come to a short stop there, right? For a short period of time, he's not gaining any distance, right? It's not going up at all. So what we would say is that maybe this is like a 4-way stop sign, right? Like the one that's near the high school here, right? So 4-way stop sign, you got to wait your turn, and then you keep on going, right? After that, we got that orange piece, right? We're going up again, but it's definitely not as steep as that red piece was at the beginning, right? So that red piece, we were right off the bat. For this orange bit, we're moving a little more slowly, right? So going the speed limit maybe. Right, so we would assume they're like, all right, maybe we're going the speed limit there, right? We're going to kind of keep on going just a little more slowly than we started out. We then get to that green piece, right, where again, we're stopped, right? I don't know, maybe it's another 4-way stop. Maybe this is a red light. Oops. Pencil's doing something funky there. There we go. Oops. No, it's still doing it. That's all right. So maybe we hit a red light there, but we didn't have to wait too long, and then all of a sudden we were back on our way. Right? That purple piece at the end, right? Again, we're traveling forward, right? We're gaining distance. It's going up. So again, we're, going the speed limit again, probably. Right? And that kind of captures the entire picture of what we're doing, right? We started off real fast. We had to stop. We went kind of a little slower. We had to stop again. And then we're, continuing on our way, right? So I'm hoping that as we're, taking a look at this second one, it's kind of making a little more sense as to what's going on, right? So we got this third one down here. This graph represents the distance a track team runs during practice. I want to describe what happens in this one. So, what I'd like you to do here is not only identify all the different pieces, but kind of think to yourself and write down what you think might be happening in each one, right? So pause here, unpause when you think you know what's going on. All right, so hopefully you gave that a go, right? Let's break it down. Wooka wooka. Right, so we've got this chunk here, right, where we're going up a little bit. We then kind of level off there. We're going up again at about the same speed as before. And then to finish things off, oops, we're apparently going all the way over there. I don't know why this is being a little tricky, but I apologize. There we go. All right, so we've got these 4 different pieces going on. So, I'm going to run through it with what I'm thinking is going on. If yours is somewhat similar, then that's awesome. Right? So for that red chunk, right, we're doing some sort of like warm-up, like a warm-up run, kind of fast. Right, if you're thinking about, we're covering a good chunk of distance in a decent amount of time, right? It's not like we're sprinting, right? But we're covering some decent distance there. When we get to the blue piece, right, we stop. Right, so what might be going on there is that maybe we're having some sort of a water break or something like that. right? But the big idea is that we are not traveling forward or backward. We have stopped. We're not traveling anywhere right then, right? That orange piece that comes after it, right? We are, back to running. And again, I think that's another area where we're going kind of fast, right? It sort of matches up with how steep the red piece was at the beginning, maybe even a little bit faster, right? It's a little even steeper than that was, right? So we got a whole lot of energy. We just fueled up with some H2O, right? And now we're back to the grind. We're running away. That green piece at the very end, right? We're running, but we're tired. Right, we slowed down a little bit. All right, so you can see that green piece is not quite as steep as the red or the orange piece was, right? It means that we're probably getting a little bit more tired. We're trying to pace ourselves a little better, so we have slowed down a little bit there, right? So hopefully that seems all right so far. We got a couple more we're going to talk through together, and then we're already going to be done just about. All right, this one on the back describes the height of a bungee jumper. Ooh, extreme sports. Wowee. Right, so what we're going to try and do is describe what happens in this graph. All right, so again, I would encourage you to pause here, see if you can figure out what the individual chunks we might be talking about are. It might end up being a little trickier on this one. Yours might not match perfectly with mine, but that's all right as long as we get the right idea. All right, so hopefully you gave that a shot if you're feeling up to it. What I'm seeing is that we've got this chunk there. Oops, switched to the highlighter by accident. We've got this big downward chunk here. Right. After that, I'm lumping all of this into one big piece. Right. And then we've got this last piece down at the end there. Right. So there's a decent chunk of stuff going on. All right. If you're somebody where, like, on here, these colors might be a little confusing because they're all kind of back and forth and up and down, right? Feel free to, back up and, take a look at your graph without them. But what I'm seeing is that maybe around the red, we're not traveling at all, right? We're at a pretty high height, right? We're up at like the top of whatever kind of canyon bridge sort of thing we're bungee jumping from, right? So maybe we're hesitating, right? We haven't jumped yet. It's really scary, you're like 300 feet in the air and you're like, oh my God, am I going to do this? Right. After that, this big blue piece is Geronimo. Right? So this is where we jumped, right? This is our big first fall. So we're traveling down pretty quickly, right? We're succumbing to the forces of gravity. After that orange piece, we go up and then down and then up a little bit again, right? So that's the bungee cord in action. Right, we're kind of bouncing up and down, right? Because again, on this one, the y-axis is talking about our height, right? It's describing how far we are off the ground. We started up high with the red, we traveled way down with the blue, and then we're bouncing up and down with the orange. And then that green piece, right? It looks like we're coming down to earth, but it's definitely slower than it was with the blue, right? We are being lowered to the ground. Right, so hopefully that seems all right for this one, right? This one can be a little trickier than some of the other ones because it's talking about height instead of distance, right? Sort of kind of in the same vein of things, right? But it is a little different, right? Let's talk through another one together, right? But before we go through every piece, this one's talking about the sales of lawnmowers at Home Depot over the course of a year. So I want you to, again, take a second, see if you can identify the individual chunks we're going to talk about. And then after that, see if you can come up with an idea of what each piece is doing. Right, so hopefully you gave that a shot, right? What I'm seeing is these different chunks, right? We got a red chunk there, a flat blue piece there. We've got this all the way up there, right? And I'm actually going to include this piece right there with it. And again, yours don't need to match mine perfectly, right? As long as we end up kind of getting the same idea at the end, that's really what we're worried about. I'm going to grab a whole bunch of that in green, and then just this last little bit with the purple. All right, so I've got 5 different pieces. You might have more, you might have less, but again, let's work through it. Let's see if we're kind of thinking about it the same way, because that's really what it's about, right? I might be interpreting it a little bit differently than you are. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, right? So that red piece, what I'm seeing is it's moving up a little bit, right? We're talking about sales of lawnmowers, right? So sales are going up a little bit, right? So maybe spring is approaching, right? Let's say that it's, it's March. It's kind of starting to get a little bit warm on some days, and people are like, oh man, I need to replace my lawnmower. Let's go out and get one of those. All right, so sales are kind of ticking up a little bit. Maybe for the blue, spring is real close. Right, and sales are maintaining, right? They're kind of staying stagnant. So, right, we could say like they're holding steady. Right, maybe Home Depot is selling 20 lawnmowers a day throughout like March and part of April, right? After that, we got this orange piece, and holy moly, if we look at that, right, sales skyrocket, right? So what I'm thinking is that this is spring plus summer holding steady once it flattens out. All right, so we kind of grabbed 2 different little bits there, right? We talked about how it's going way up and then it's holding that peak, right up here where it's plateaued a little bit, right? It's kind of flattened off at the top, right? After that, we've got this green piece where we're going right back down. Sales are declining fast, right? Maybe it's like the start of fall, right? I guess I should say autumn here, because if we're talking about fall, we might be talking about falling sales. Autumn starting, right? Sometimes you might still need to mow the grass, right? It still grows underneath all those leaves, right? But you definitely probably don't want to get a new lawnmower right before winter hits. And the reason that I singled out that last little bit with the purple is that sales drop to 0 or nothing, right? And I'm assuming that that's probably the winter time, right? Because most people probably don't buy a lawnmower in the middle of January, What do I know? But, in my experience, I probably wouldn't want one in January. So, sales are dropping to nothing, and then that's where it kind of stops, right? So again, your reasoning and your breakdown of this graph might look different than mine. You might have chosen every chunk that's all straight in one line together, right? And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But as long as we're getting kind of the same idea behind this, that's what we're really working on, right? So last piece here, and then I will stop talking. Oh boy, I know you're excited for that. So last question. In a triathlon, athletes swim 2 miles, bicycle 52.4 miles, and run 26.2 miles. Ooh, what a distance. Their total time includes transition time from one activity to the next. We want to figure out which of these graphs best represents a participant in a triathlon. We want to explain why. So take a second here, right? Read through the question again if you need to, and then take a look at these 3 graphs and think about which one do you think represents somebody that's participating in a triathlon. So hopefully you took this second there and did that, right? If you still haven't, pause here and then unpause and you got it. What I'm seeing is that graph A, we're covering a lot of distance. It's just zoop going up, right? So we're covering distance over time, but it's all at the same rate, right? Like if I was grabbing this as a chunk, right, it's all just one piece. Oops. Let's grab it as one piece like we normally have, right? That doesn't really seem correct, right? Like if I'm swimming and biking and running, I'm probably not going the exact same speed all the way through, right? So what I'm thinking is that graph A is out of there, right? Graph B looks pretty promising actually, right? If I'm looking at graph B, right, we're going up real quick at the start there, and then we kind of level off. We're then going forward again, stopping again, and then going up again, right? So we can kind of break it into all those different little pieces. So that one seems pretty all right, right? Like these might be the breaks or the transition times. All right, but just to be absolutely sure, let's take a look at graph C just to see what we're missing. So for graph C, I'm seeing that, like, all right, we're going a little slowly, right? And then we stop. And then we go pretty darn fast for the rest. So graph C is kind of similar to B, right? The only difference is that it seems like there's only one little break there, right? With the purple where it flattens out. So it's like there's one transition. So what I'm seeing is, I still think graph B might be the best graph to represent somebody in a triathlon because you're transitioning from swimming to biking and from biking to running, right? You need two transitions. Graph C only shows us one. So I think graph C is out. All right, so what we'd say on this one is graph B is the best. Oops. What word is that? Right, graph B is the best because it shows two transitions. Right, and that's really most of why I would want to choose that one, right? We're switching from swimming to biking. You don't want to swim in a wet bathing suit. You want to go into a changing room real quick, change into some biking shorts or something, put on your shoes probably, and get on the bike then. And then when you're moving from biking to running, it's probably a faster transition, but you got to take off your helmet. You might want to change your shoes depending on how intense it is, right? Stuff like that. All right, so I would choose graph B here. All right, so that's it for this set of notes, right? Be sure to check on Google Classroom for any additional stuff. Be sure to ask me or whoever your teacher is if you need any help with anything, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.